Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for joining our session. My name is Adam Parker here with Carnegie. If you're anything like me, the world has seemingly changed overnight with the rollout of artificial intelligence over the last year. So I'm excited to introduce operationalizing generative AI. I need an AI to pronounce that, featuring our own Voltaire and James Weinberg. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. The session is recorded, as you got a notification when you joined. However, we'll be providing all the recordings to the sessions and links to the data after the session. I will direct you to use the chat and Q&A functionality within Whova, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. Please do not use the Zoom chat. Please be within Whova, and I will make sure to get to all questions throughout, time permitting. Finally, we encourage you to be social during these sessions. If Volt or James share any great content that you want to post afterwards, make sure to use the hashtag The Connection and tag Carnegie HQ to make sure that there's a lot of visibility in that. With that, I have the great pleasure to turn this session over to Volt and James.
Awesome, Adam, thank you very much. And thank you everyone who is part of this session today, much appreciated. So we've got a fairly packed agenda for the next 40 minutes planned for you, 7 main points that we want to cover, starting with a short and incomplete history of generative AI, otherwise known as Gen AI, defining operationalization, the 3 steps we promised you in our description of what you would get from this workshop, which is mindful intent, purposeful use, and objective assessment, an example of this philosophy in practice. And then we'll save, I would say, about 10 minutes at the end of our session for questions and answers. We'll also build in a little bit of buffer time to give you some breathing space between our session and any sessions you'll be attending at the top of the hour. So let's begin with a little bit more in terms of introduction. Scooter, I'm going to turn it over to you, and probably the first thing to do is explain Scooter.
Well, the cat's out of the bag. My official name is James Weinberg, but I was 2 months premature, weighed 2 pounds, lived in an incubator for the first couple of years of my life, and apparently was very active. And so the nurses hung a sign on my incubator saying, "This one's a scooter," and it's stuck, whether I wanted it to or not. So I work at Carnegie mainly in a product development capacity with increasing interest and emphasis on artificial intelligence. Before my higher education marketing career, I was a high school teacher, teaching English, ESL, journalism, and recess. And then I am a professional musician when I'm not involved in marketing. I am a percussionist and songwriter, and I try not to use AI in my music, but you never know.
But that's going to be for a different conference, right, Scooter?
Exactly.
Good deal. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Voltaire. I go by Volt. I am the Executive Vice President for Creative at Carnegie. Prior to being at Carnegie, I was one of the co-founders and the CEO of M. Stoner, an agency that focused on web development for colleges and universities for the better part of 20 years. Before then, I spent roughly a decade as a university development officer for local colleges and universities in Chicago. And even though I have spent most of my life working in digital, I've got to admit that I still really love the sensation of fountain pen ink and nib on paper. All right, so as we dive into this workshop, we've got an opening question for you, which is, how are you using generative AI today? I'm going to ask Adam to come back on the screen and walk us through the poll function at Whova. Whova.
So as those poll results are streaming in, a lot of folks, I guess 0% have not heard the term artificial intelligence, so they came to the right place. Roughly 13% is their institution is AI averse, privacy, copyright, and all the other things involved. 75% is they use it informally, somewhat haphazardly, which I think we all find ourselves stumbling around in the dark in that retrospect. And that is the result.
All right. Anyone in option 4, responsible AI policy recommended suite of tools?
We're coming up with a goose egg.
Okay, all right. Well, if any of you are just quietly withholding, but actually have spent a lot of time with this, then we would love to hear from you and your lessons learned as we walk through our material. But thank you all very much for answering that poll. That pretty much is what we expected when we launched this poll, or when we put this poll together. The fact that most institutions are exploring AI, but are really quite sure how to approach this in a sustainable and a smart way. And that really leads us to our goal for this session. What we are hoping to be able to do is to give you a framework that will hold water as you explore the use of generative AI in your work. And I think the best place to start in all this is to begin at the beginning. So let's start with a short and incomplete history of generative AI. Most people that I talk to are surprised when they find out that AI is a relatively young discipline in terms of scientific inquiry. It started in the 1950s as a fledgling field of scientific discovery. And the first neural network, which was developed between the 1950s and the 1960s, was discredited by a couple of prominent MIT researchers. Once that neural network was discredited, AI entered its first winter. This is also something that a lot of people don't know, is that in the span of time between the 1950s and today, AI has actually endured two major winters. What do I mean by winters? Winter is basically a period of time in which people did not believe AI was a viable area of scientific inquiry, and funding, both corporate and federal, completely dried up. So when you take a look at this timeline, you'll see that from 1973 to 1980, there was a fairly long winter for AI, and then another long winter from the 1990s to the 2000s. So when you think about the development timeline of AI, a lot of it was spent with very few people actually doing meaningful work in the field. You fast forward to 2015, two main things happened in 2015 to make it a standout year. The first is that a system called AlphaGo began its winning streak. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the board game Go. I've never played it myself. I am told that it is chess on steroids, that it is more than 3,000 years old. It is highly complex, and it has a huge international following. AlphaGo is a program that was written by DeepMind to compete with the best of the best in the Go sort of stratosphere. In 2015, AlphaGo started beating the best players in the world. The second thing that happened in 2015 is that OpenAI launched. Those of you who are familiar with the name, or those of you who aren't familiar with OpenAI, OpenAI is the company that gave us ChatGPT. In 2018, three people who were the founding fathers of AI, that would be Hinton, Bengio, and LeCun, win the Turing Award. So in 2018, AI is finally being recognized as a super viable scientific field of inquiry. And then in 2022, ChatGPT is released. Think about that. Less than 12 months ago was the first exposure that most of us got to ChatGPT. And when you think about everything that has happened in the last 12 months, AI here, there, everywhere, it is mind-boggling to see how something that started out slow and syncopated picked up so much steam within the last, say, decade. Now, what is the reason for our taking a look at the background of AI? It's to give a sense not only of what is happening, but why it is happening. I really love this quote from Steve T, the Chief Product Officer from Mozilla. He says in this recent article from the Washington Post, there's a real bad sense of FOMO among big tech companies that want to do AI, and they don't want to miss out on generating an early audience. All of them know that these systems are not perfect. So if you've paid attention to AI at all, you will find that every day, some other company, big or small, is releasing some sort of tool, some sort of product, some sort of service that is either AI driven or AI supportive. And that means that there are really three offshots to this discussion. The first is that big funding and big hype are currently feeding each other in the current development and deployment cycle. Corporations are investing billions of dollars in this AI race. And the hype that surrounds all of this feeds more investment, and that investment feeds more hype. So we find ourselves in this really incredible cycle of funding and promotion driving AI. The second thing for us to realize is that AI is here to stay and is already around us. I won't spend a lot of time talking about how AI has been embedded in tools of everyday use for almost the last more than 5 years now, but it's here to stay, and we are using it in ways that we don't even recognize. The third most important thing for us to realize here is that we are responsible for the guardrails we put into place for ourselves and each other. AI is going to continue to drive innovation. Industry is going to continue to chase profits and monetization of AI. The government is going to continue to lag behind industry. And as we look at how AI is impacting our work lives and our personal lives, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're the ones who need to be responsible for how we use AI, how we view AI, and how we keep ourselves at the center of the story, even as we are feeling both downward and upward pressure to use and integrate AI into our personal and our work lives as much as possible. So pressure forces reaction, and it's up to us to get it right. So let's talk about step one of getting it right. And for me, first, let's talk about defining operationalization. So operationalization is, if you take a look at, you just Google it, you will find definitions that pretty much riff on this short phrase. Operationalization is moving from abstract concept to observable and measurable phenomenon. It's this idea that we all know that AI is around us and that AI theoretically can bring us a lot of benefits. But how do we move from that sort of 50,000 foot sort of sensibility of, oh, okay, there are some things that AI is useful, to actually employing it, experimenting with it, deciding what merits it brings, and then deciding how we're going to use that on any sort of ongoing basis. And the first step in operationalization is, as far as we're concerned, mindful intent. When you think about the fact that AI is probably the most disruptive technology we've seen since the advent of the internet in the early 2000s, people are really, really worried. And they're really worried for, I would say, very legitimate reasons. People are asking, well, what does this do for my job today? What does this do for my career prospects in the future? How does this impact the geopolitical climate that we are in? How is this going to disrupt our world? And how am I going to cope? Those are all really important and good questions for us to ask. And so in step one, we begin with this idea of mindful intent. And mindful intent has two parts to it. The first part is philosophy and principle. So I tell all of the organizations we work with who are exploring AI that the first thing to do is to get down on paper what your intentions are with AI. And that statement of intent, and a lot of people will call this the responsible AI statement, should cover something along the lines of the following 10 pieces. The first is this idea of human centrality and accountability. Not only are we to remain in the center of the story, but we are also accountable for making sure that we use technology properly. That moves us to the next thing that any sort of AI, responsible AI statement should have. It's this idea that we are going to use technology responsibly and appropriately. When I was working with members of the creative team on a draft of Carnegie's own responsible AI statement, was talking with one of our writers, Gia, who has a master's degree in appropriate technology, and she was explaining the principles behind taking a look at technology and asking some really important questions before introducing technology to any sort of community. And it's the understanding that technology in and of itself is necessarily not good or bad, but the way that we apply it, the context in which we use it, and the when it is introduced and how it is introduced to any given community is going to have a huge impact on whether technology is used well or used poorly. Third thing that your AI policy should have is this idea of statement or an exploration of automation without dehumanization. One of the things that we know AI does really well is it speeds up a lot of things that the human brain doesn't process as quickly. When you think about large language or large learning models and what they do, they are incredible prediction machines. They are able to analyze content and images and come up with the best possible or the most likely possible response based on that pattern recognition. So when we can automate things and take things off of our plates that free us to do the things we want to do, that's really great. But we want to make sure that that automation does not take place without that automation takes place without dehumanizing us and our work. The affirmation of the power of communication is really important in philosophy and principle as well. Words and images have the power to change our world for good or for bad. So acknowledging the fact that we have that responsibility to deploy that well and stating a commitment to never intentionally using communications for misinformation, to sow any sorts of unrest unfairly. That's all part of that part of the statement. An inclusive process of exploration and adoption was also really important to us at Carnegie when we were crafting our responsible AI statement. And then also a commitment to eliminate bias. Those of you who have spent time learning about AI know that AI can have and AI does reflect biases that come from the training materials. Large language models, we are trying to eliminate content that will introduce a bias that will come back to haunt us later. The commitment to transparency and respect for privacy, to upskilling and reskilling professionals, open sharing of ideas and knowledge, and then curiosity and flexibility are all also part of a responsible AI statement. So if you are an organization that is just beginning to explore AI, this is a really great time for you to put your responsible AI statement in place. And I'll talk a little bit about how we did this at Carnegie and how we are continuing to do this in Carnegie in just a bit. So part one is just getting down on paper what you believe and how that belief is going to drive your exploration of AI. Part two is the actual policy and process. Most institutions, frankly, don't have this yet, but this is something that institutions will need to grapple with and get in place sooner than later. And that is this idea of governance. Now, I've spent 20 years working on governance in different shapes and forms. I've worked on web governance policy, brand governance policy. And so as we look at AI governance, we can dive in with some prior knowledge of what works and what doesn't work. And if I were to define governance in a very simple and easy way, I would say governance is basically deciding who gets to decide. So your governance policy should cover four main things. It should cover access and authority. That's the who. Who gets to use AI within the organization, either for internal or external purposes? And what levels of access do people have to AI? The second is proper tools and technology. What tools are you using? And then the third piece is the proper use of the technology. When and where are you going to be using it? And then proper practice, all of the policies and procedures is the how you're going to use it. So any good governance policy, whether you're talking about AI or brand or web, will cover the who, what, when, where, and how of policy and procedure. And related to that, is this idea of training and support. So one of the main principles of any sort of governance plan is that your governance plan needs to calibrate a balance between the resources and the support you're going to provide and your expectations of compliance with the people who are using these tools. So basically, to boil that down, if you are going to mandate a certain level here, then you are going to need to provide the level of support and training necessary to make sure that people can successfully meet those policy expectations. So what training and support are you going to provide? Who's going to provide that? How centralized or decentralized is that? Remediation is a second thing that undergirds governance policy, which is what happens when people fall out of line? What happens when a policy needs to be reevaluated? What happens when a use case scenario that you hadn't originally considered actually becomes a reality? How do you as an organization deal with those areas? And then finally, how do you apply your governance policy for internal, which is mostly efficiency and productivity, and external, which could be revenue generation, product development, services and offerings? How do you apply your policy for AI to that area of your work? So I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We have been and continue to be in this process of developing our statement and our governance plan for Carnegie. So one of the things that I learned very early on is that it's really important to engage the team. Your responsible AI statement cannot be something that is written by one person and then published. It cannot be something that is simply approved by senior leadership and then made public. It needs to be something that people who are going to be affected by the policy can speak into and have a role in shaping. So engaging your team means inviting and celebrating a diversity of opinion. And when you think about all of the different things swirling around AI, you can imagine that there are going to be people with very strong feelings either for or against the use of AI in external or internal work. The second thing that engaging your team is important to do is building that empathy for people's concerns and worries. If you, there are a bunch of reports out right now that talk about how AI is going to drive more than $1 trillion worth of revenue to our economy. I forget whether it's in the next 3 years or so. But when you think about what the expectations are for AI and how it is going to impact our work, these concerns and worries about people's professional lives are not only well-founded, they are going to be at the forefront of people's minds and they need to be addressed. There's also going to be some excitement. And so it would be great to harness that excitement for what is possible. And those are the people who are really great for serving in your incubators and for figuring out what products you are going to test or develop. And then finally, this idea of embracing iteration. We are about to release our responsible AI policy, and we all know that that's a policy that we are going to update and revisit on the regular, particularly as technology evolves and as the legalities surrounding AI continue to change and adapt to what we're seeing in the market. The last thing I'll say here is in shaping your responsible AI statement and your governance policies, you can lean on forerunners for some really great examples. So the Marketing Institute's Responsible AI Manifesto, for instance, is something that we leaned on heavily in drafting Carnegie's own responsible AI statement. Wired has a great statement on general AI use or generative AI use. Google, Accenture, HubSpot. Basically, you can Google at any point responsible AI and governance and get some really legit resources to help you on your way. But we've included 5 of them in this presentation, and we'll make sure that when you get this deck, those links will bring you to those proper materials. So that is step 1, which is basically mindful intent. How do you make sure that you are showing mindful intent in the way that you approach generative AI and operationalizing it within your organization? Step 2 is purposeful use, and I'll turn it over to James to talk about what that means. James, or Scooter.
Yeah, excellent. If you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, please. So when we think about the artificial intelligence to whatever the business or institutional challenge we're thinking of, First, we have to have an understanding as to the landscape of available technology. So the first question is, does the technology even exist to solve this problem? And frankly, that just takes research and reading, talking to people, experts. Once it's determined whether a challenge can even be met by artificial intelligence, then we have to look internally and ask ourselves, do we have the internal knowledge and resources to be able to put this technology into play? Do we have the time to do it? And importantly, do we have the money to do it? Certain AI related challenges can currently be approached relatively inexpensively using the tools that OpenAI and others have provided. Others require a more bespoke approach and therefore more expertise, time, money. So the first thing we have to do is figure out, is this even possible? Assuming that the answer is yes, the technologies do exist, we do have the internal expertise, the time and money. The next question is, should we apply artificial intelligence to this problem? And what are the criteria in terms of how we would make this decision? One is, will using artificial intelligence enable us to scale our efforts? Meaning, for example, we know that most of our employees maybe work Monday through Friday schedules. So if we had chatbots on our websites or answering administrative questions that students or prospective students might ask on the weekend, will AI enable us to offer a level of scale that our humans can't provide? 24/7 access to information, for example. Then we have to decide, will the quality of the information provided by AI be sufficient? Will it be accurate? Is it a good reflection of the way that our people would answer questions? There are all kinds of ethics related to AI, and Volt mentioned that eliminating bias is one of those. So we know that these systems are trained by historical data. So it's very important that whatever historical data are feeding our AI applications, that they are as free of bias as possible. And furthermore, that the output does not favor certain groups or conversely exclude certain groups or minimize certain people's interests or goals. There are big risks. So for example, we're going to show you in a few minutes an actual AI application that Carnegie has out in the field with certain clients. And it's designed to help prospective students find out more information about specific schools and programs and student life, et cetera. But what we had to be very careful of, and something that we're still addressing daily, is what are the risks associated with wrong answers? So for example, if prospective students were inquiring about financial aid information, application deadlines, we have to be really sure that the AI isn't giving answers that could frankly derail somebody's pursuit of higher education. So that would be an example of assessing whether the risks involved of conveying information through AI are even worth it for specific use cases. So if we decide that any specific problem can be addressed by AI and then should be addressed by AI, we then move on to the questions of what and how will we apply AI to address this challenge. The first thing is we need to be transparent. So moving again to examples of chatbots or other ways that students, anybody within our institutions internally or externally might engage with AI, it's very important in most cases to tell those people that they're engaging with AI. Otherwise, some sticky situations could arise. This helps set expectations, and it also allows the people engaging to understand that if things go awry, there are people to contact and that this wasn't the end all be all source of truth. Which brings us to having humans in the loop. This is extremely important. There has to be oversight and in some cases intervention. So the chatbot again that we're going to show you is a great example. Every single day, people internal at Carnegie as well as the client institution that is using the technology are reviewing the conversations that prospective students are having so that if we cite error, if we spot errant responses, somebody actually reaches out to those students and corrects the information. The best way to minimize that error, which in many cases is called hallucination in the AI world, that means when AI systems very confidently state inaccurate information. One of the best ways to minimize that risk is to restrict the knowledge bases of the AI. So, for example, the chatbots that our clients are using are restricted solely to the website content of those institutions. They're not allowed to go outside of those web domains. So if people ask inappropriate or off-topic questions that really don't have anything to do with the institution or the pursuit of higher education, they are gently told that the bot only is able to answer questions related to admissions, financial aid, etc. Again, it's very important to be inclusive. So we have thought in partnership with our institutional partners, are we sure that the feedback that users might get will be met without bias and without weighting? So, and by weighting, I mean WEIGHTING. So it's very important that the goals, that the desires, that the information requests of all kinds of people have an equal opportunity to be answered and are not minimized. Moving on. So how do we assess whether our AI systems are working? Very good question. Now, this oft misappropriated quote to Peter Drucker, the quote itself is still valid, even though Peter Drucker is in fact not the person who came up with this. Peter Drucker doesn't really need any more accolades. He's pretty good in many ways. So only what is measured gets managed. Very important. This brings us to quantitative objectivity. What are the metrics through which we analyze the effectiveness, or in some cases, ineffectiveness of AI? Depending upon who we are at our institutions, we are going to be evaluated by different metrics. If we're in marketing, that might be, sales. That might be retention, right? Many of us work in revenue centers where we are held to the value of dollars, income. Other types of metrics might include satisfaction. So if we're providing customer service, there might be surveys sent to students or prospective students that gauge satisfaction in terms of those interactions. If we work in admissions, we might be judged by enrollment numbers. If we work in alumni relations, perhaps by donations or different levels of alumni attendance at events, for example. All in all, our goals are to reduce high-touch, low-volume interactions and increase high-touch, high-value interactions, not volume. So we want to, again, enhance our human abilities to engage in the types of work that we want to do and that we should be doing, and use AI for the drudgery, for the mundane tasks that calculators have done, that computers have done. Now, this new innovation just gives us the opportunities to, again, as Walt mentioned, hopefully do less of the things that humans aren't as good at, like calculating and responding at 2 in the morning. Other goals that we might aspire to are keeping members of our team happy and engaged. As AI and the solutions that it offers become more prevalent, we really, really don't want to see people heading for the hills and thinking, again, that they're being replaced. That is exactly what we don't want. We want to ensure that AI is being used to enhance people's performance, to create new types of tasks that weren't even imaginable or available 6 months ago. And we want to keep our teams productive, right? So whether that means writing blog posts or emails, creating social media posts, we want these tools to help in those efforts so that as humans, we can focus on the creative and the strategic and less on the mechanical and operational. At the end of the day, we just want everybody to be happy and happier. So let's take a quick moment to look at what I've been hinting at, which is an actual use case. So what you're seeing in the lower right of this screenshot is an AI-powered chatbot that is querying Holy Family University, in this case's website. And what's great about this is that it enables prospective students to ask questions using their language and communication styles. One of the great things about artificial intelligence, when it works well, is that it should foster communication in the way that people want to communicate. So in some cases, this chatbots have been around for a long time, right? This isn't a new use case. But one of the pitfalls of past chatbot models before artificial intelligence was that they very often forced prospective students or other users into communicating in the way that the institution set up in that user experience. So one of the things we're most excited about is letting people use their own voices to get information. So again, this chatbot is gated. It means that in theory, it should not be able to answer questions that are not associated with life or programs or admissions deadlines, etc., at Holy Family. So we're very excited about this. I would say that the results so far have been very good. Is it wrong sometimes? Absolutely. And we watch it every day. And when we find inaccurate information, somebody at Holy Family reaches out to that prospective student and corrects it. So there's always a human in the loop. The great news here is that the technology is getting better every day. We are in the infancy of AI. We're in the infancy of all these tools. In 6 months or a year, we're going to look back and we're going to have a good old belly laugh at this chatbot. And that will be the case for everything. So, Volt, am I turning it back over to you now? Or I can't remember.
No, I believe, James.
I can keep rolling. I can keep rolling.
Yes.
So let's. Oh, I'm sorry, Volt. Go ahead.
Just going to say, just going back to what you covered in the last section, Scooter, the 3 questions that we ask when we are looking at applying AI to a problem space. So tag, you're it.
100%. So you remember that one of the first questions we need to ask ourselves is, can AI be applied to this problem? Does the technology exist to address our challenge? In the case of the chatbot we just showed you, we knew that that was a use case that was possible. We were, other people were already using AI in this conversational exchange. We knew that the technology was there. Luckily, our team had the internal expertise. We had the programming knowledge. We had the know-how in terms of how to use the different pieces that had to be put together and the different services that would be needed to power a solution like this. We were able to check that box. We had the time. We have employees, such as myself, who dedicate and have a lot of time to spend on looking at best ways to implement solutions such as this. And importantly, we had the resources financially, as did our client. So, it's important clearly that we analyze our own budgets for whether we can develop certain solutions, but then we also have to ask, will this be affordable for our institutional partners? So once all these 4 boxes were checked, we knew that we could apply AI to this challenge of meeting prospective students 24/7. Now, once we knew that we could do it, the question became, should we do it? We knew that if we could increase responsiveness for prospective students and make information available to them 24/7, that would be a win, right? Kind of eliminating this notion of business hours, if you will, being able to let international students who are on different time zones find out information about the institution when staff wouldn't be working at the school. That was compelling. What's great about this is that when it's working well, which it is for the most part, a lot of staff who would otherwise be answering these types of questions have the capacity to focus on other work that is high value for them. So a lot of these mundane questions, routine questions related to when are admissions deadlines, questions about financial aid, those can now be handled by the bot, and the admissions team can focus on other types of challenges. We knew that because the website content that we were querying had been vetted to remove bias, we didn't need to worry about introducing algorithms that were going to perpetuate bias. So that was really important. All the information that was gated and that was queryable, we knew was fair and represented people of all walks of life, of all interests, and with various goals. And I mentioned to you that, again, we oversee this bot. So humans are always in the loop. If there are risks associated with misinformation, which there clearly are, we're able to jump on them quickly and hopefully address them before anything bad happens or bad decisions are made. So once we decided that this idea of being able to address prospective students 24/7 and enabling them to use their own communication styles was both possible and should be done, how did we do it and what did we do? So first is we made it known that the engagement is driven by AI. We want it to be very clear that users, in this case, prospective students, are communicating with a bot, that the bot might be wrong sometimes, and that there is no substitute for reaching out to a good old human being if the information being accurate is pertinent, and that humans are, in fact, available if the bot experience isn't satisfactory. So again, every day, staff, both internally at the institution and myself and other members of the team, are always looking at the conversations. We do this not only to address errors, but also to optimize the programming so that if we notice patterns and errors, we can adjust the code to hopefully mitigate the chances of those errors continuing. We're using specific technologies as well as methodologies to restrict the large language model's content access. There are many engines, including OpenAI, and different paint jobs and options that you can get on top of those engines to create AI experiences. It's very important to know what's available, what the pros and cons of those companies and their solutions are, and to apply them with the best chance for accuracy, fairness, value. So there's a lot of considerations there that are ethical, financial, technological. You want to make sure that you're using the services of a company that is stable and won't potentially disappear in 2 months and leave you holding the bag. So we wanted to make sure, again, that we did not introduce any algorithms that could exclude specific groups or their interests unfairly. And I know we've kind of hammered that point, but that is so important. So important that everybody has a chance to use their own voice and get information presented to them fairly and even-handedly.
Awesome. Thanks, Scooter. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in the last 45 minutes. We've talked about the history of AI, the idea or the definition of operationalization, the 3 steps that we follow at Carnegie in terms of approaching AI and figuring out how to experiment and perhaps how to operationalize particular products. And then we showed you one use case scenario in which we applied that framework. The few minutes that we have left, we would like to open up to questions and answers. So turning back to Adam as our moderator to keep us moving along. Yeah. Adam, tag, you're in.
James Volt, sincerely appreciate that overview and example that you shared. Along the examples theme, Carolyn asks, do you have any examples of success stories outside of chatbots? Our office is in the AI brainstorming phase, and we're looking to be sparked by other ideas.
I can field that one. Sure. The answer is absolutely yes. So one of the main focal points here today was on generative AI, right? That's using AI to converse to produce text or images. A lot of the work that we're doing at Carnegie also focuses on what we refer to as analytical AI. So we have some solutions, for example, in the market research space, in the assessment of content space, where we're using AI not only on the generative side, but also to make our analyses faster when it comes to data, when it comes to analyzing the efficacy of social media posts or web content, et cetera. We're more than happy to have a conversation with you, but we would definitely recommend looking at AI both from a generative sense as well as in an analytical capacity.
Perfect. Appreciate that, James. Another question that I just got is, which you may or may not have covered this at the beginning, but what is the relationship between AI and SEO? Does supporting SEO help with leveraging AI tools on your website in any capacity?
James, this is
sure.
Like...
So the answer is yes. There are actually some great examples of tools specifically for SEO that leverage AI, particularly when it comes to the processes of optimization, which might include keyword research, creating long tail keywords, infusing keywords in metadata on page content. There are a whole bunch of benefits that AI has been shown, both in terms of on page content as well as kind of back end metadata. The principles of SEO haven't necessarily been changed entirely by AI yet, but the mechanics in terms of the speed through which content can be produced and optimized is definitely undergoing change. Does that answer your question?
I believe so, hopefully. One more question we have here. Obviously, you showed the example of the AI chatbot. Could you talk a little bit more about the process for developing that chatbot from the initial thought through kind of implementation?
Sure. So as the tools of ChatGPT and similar ones came about, our team was really looking at ways that these new tools could enhance a lot of the other tools that we were using. And what I mean by that is programming languages, CRM systems, student information systems, everything. And exploring. So when you think about it, OpenAI, ChatGPT, was trained on more or less the entire internet from 2021 spanning to the beginning. That's such a mind-boggling amount of information. But included in that is code, literal code for different programming languages, HTML, CSS, Python, JavaScript, you name it. What this means is that there is an amazing amount of raw material through which all of the tools that we use every day, both technical and non-technical, can be enhanced and modified by artificial intelligence. So what we literally did was we looked at some existing tools that were in development, for example, in the chatbot space. We looked at the code and we basically said to ChatGPT and similar tools, how could we leverage what we have here, this kind of initial cookie dough, if you will. If we wanted to bake cookies using AI, what would we do? And we iterated both internally with humans and with the machines and churned out an initial product. And then we did a lot of research, and we were thinking about some of those challenges, and we were seeing examples of use cases where AI had gone awry and gone into, you've all heard the stories, people baiting AI into racist tirades and all kinds of things. And we knew we didn't want that. We knew that was something we definitely did not want. So one of the biggest learnings was, how can we restrict large language models to a walled garden? And what would be in that garden? So we worked with the institution to figure out what the most high value web content was, pages, specific bits of information. And we learned how to make that and only that content available to the AI that we were building. Then we did a lot of testing. Before it was ever put on the school's website, we tested it. We asked it, legitimate questions, as well as, how much is a pack of cigarettes in Tucson, Arizona? We tried to think of different use cases, different questions people might ask, in some cases in an effort to get it to go awry, so that to the best of our abilities, in a timely and cost-effective way, we could try and anticipate use cases that were both intended and unintended, and see what we could do to keep the experience as valuable as it could be, and again, minimize room for a runaway train wreck. So the truth is that there's no way that we can ever guarantee ourselves perfection or the ability to safeguard against everything and anything, but there are processes that we can put in place, a lot of which is frankly just good conversation. Volt mentioned the importance of bringing in multiple members of the team with different perspectives and different experiences. Talk to people who are involved or could be involved in the questions that are being asked and get their perspective, right? That's people in admissions, marketing, the registrar, right? I mean, we all know that a question can lead anywhere and could involve people on multiple teams. So think about, who is useful to talk to, what are the key data points that we really need to cover, and test as much as you can, and experiment. But most importantly, be transparent and watch what's happening, right? I mean, honestly, that's the most important thing that we're doing, whether it's a chatbot or otherwise, is we're monitoring. And in a few instances, we've had to step in and say, hey, Joe, we see that you were asking about a specific program start date. Want to let you know that wasn't right, what the bot told you. Here's the real time, here's the real start date. Those instances are few and far between, but they do happen. They'll happen less as the technology matures and all of our learnings mature. But I think the most important thing is to be excited about this, to experiment, to develop, but ultimately to understand, again, that we are in the infancy of this space. It's like talking about, I don't know, what was it, AOL or Netscape, or, it's like talking about Gmail and Outlook versus, Netscape and some of those tools that existed, right? It's going to be humorous in 6 months or a year, even looking back at this presentation and reviewing some of the tools that we were talking about, because it'll be night and day. But philosophically, all of the ethical questions will always remain, right? All of the collaborative questions about whom we need to involve on our teams and the types of questions we need to be asking, those will always be the same. I think what we can expect is better performance, better results, but the groundwork really starts with our philosophies and with our human practices, governance, all of that.
Perfect. Thank you, James and Volt. I think the speed at which AI is developing is as fast as this session went. So I appreciate you presenting such a human, in-depth, and compelling story. Before we head to the next sessions, James, Volt, any parting words that you want to share?
The only thing is that we're very grateful for everyone who is in this, who is watching this now, and anyone who is going to be watching this. And if you all have follow-up questions, ideas, conversations you want to bat around, reach out to us, because this is something we could talk about for hours and hours on end. And we do really believe that the best solutions that we come up with are the ones that we come up with together. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. For all of our attendees, be sure to head back to the agenda and within the Whova app to take a look at the remaining schedules and make sure to add any sessions that may pique your interest. Next up at the Connection Conference is the Higher Ed Content Marketing 3.0, the era of creators and owned media, with Zach, the founder of Enrollify, directly at 3 p.m. after this session, 3 p.m. Eastern. So appreciate everybody attending. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.